This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too.
These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
That was pretty tough, right? My name is Manuel Oliver, and I am Joaquin Oliver's dad. And I lost my beautiful son, Joaquin, in the Portland shooting almost 2 years ago. So I don't know which one of those kids is actually Joaquin, because I guess that's one of those answers that I will never get. It's kind of unfair to introduce my son that way. Joaquin was a cool dude, beautiful son, happy guy. He loved music, very creative. He was his favorite thing to do was to write, and we did many projects together. We loved the advertising industry, and we enjoyed talking about it. The commercials during the Super Bowl was our favorite part. So that said, we decided when we lost Joaquin that we needed to be part of a solution. And it's so hard to find a purpose when you are in our situation. In other words, there is nothing that I can reach that is going to make me feel better or good. We all understand that. So it's more a process than anything else. And it's going to take some time, but this is about your kids now, not about our kid. It's a little too late for us. So we decided to increase our power, stay along with Joaquin, and again, be part of our solution, become critics. And I have seen how there's a big campaign running for years in this nation that is trying to make us think that we need to carry guns. This campaign is based on actually our Constitution, which is pretty unfair. To be honest, I haven't met the first gun owner that says, I have a gun because I want to be part of a well-regulated militia that blah, 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 blah. No, you don't. Someone told you that you needed a gun, and someone told someone else that he needed a gun too, and someone else, and someone else, and someone else. So now we all need a gun from everyone that has a gun. So that said, we need to fight back that campaign. We believe that traditional things have not worked very well. And because we're still parents of Joaquin, and because we love advertising, and because we think out of the box, we came out with a few answers to that strategy that the gun lobby has been using for years. I'm going to show you a couple of things that we have done so far. want to jump to the next one. My son, Joaquin Oliver, was murdered inside of his school. He dreamed of winning a basketball championship with his teammates. Instead, he died alongside his classmates and teachers. These shoes represent the season that he never finished and the life he never lived. So I guess that being dramatic with our tragedy is a strategy, is a way to do this. Every time someone approaches either Patricia, my wife Patricia, or me, and I don't know how you do this. Well, you don't need to know. You should, but you don't need to know. And it's not about us. It's not about if we suffer or not. After knowing what Joaquin went through, how we feel doesn't really matter. So back to these two examples that I just showed you. This is where the brands, in my opinion, could jump in. And the conversation has been improving so much since we started it. And actually, if I want to make a call to action for brands, I will say, let's keep on doing what we started a few weeks ago. You saw how these 150 corporations decided to go ahead and sign a letter. And then they showed where they stand and who they stand for. And I love that. I think it's so awesome, because if there's one thing, you can do any study of consumer behavior, but before you do that, don't waste your time or money. 97% of Americans want to move forward with a universal background check. So if any corporation, any service or product wants to really hit a home run, just get on board. And I think some already got it. Some others are still thinking, but it's already happening. Look at me today. I'm wearing my Levi's t-shirt, my Gap pants, my comfortable Tom shoes. And I can't wait for Giorgio Armani to get on board. So loyalty goes back and forward. But how are we going to remind everyone that these companies made that decision? I know it. You know it. Because we're involved in the gun violence movement. We are fighting it. So we need to find a way to make sure that they know it. We need to find a way to make sure that we have more companies on board. So you have to urge your company to take a stance right now. Or show your good side. Let me know that you're a good person and your CEO thinks that way all day long. And your employees will think different because you're the boss, right? Take more tangible actions to demonstrate advocacy. Like, you really need to be all the way there. You need to show it. It's not about saying it only. And advocate fully for gun safety. It makes no sense to think in any other way. There's only one brand that's called the NRA. All the rest are other brands. So there's more of us. But how do we identify ourselves? How do we keep that reminder out there for the consumer? What if we create a gun safety certification? A brand, a stamp that, just like the organic, just like the recycling stamp, shows the consumer where he can find this company that made the right decision. Some companies are ready for this. The country, the nation is ready for this. And by the way, it's going to happen no matter what. I just want to make it a little faster so we can save some lives. So the next slide that I wanted to show, I'm not allowed because it was showing some brands, and I get it. But I want you to visualize this. This is not a red or blue problem. This is not a political problem. No, it's not. It's an ethical problem. All right? So when you think red or blue for a minute, think about Coca-Cola and Pepsi. All right? And some of us still don't know the difference on the taste. Am I right? So now I want you to visualize any of these cans with this stamp on it. That's the difference of the taste. Finally, we can tell which one tastes better. And that will happen to coffee, to shoes, to every single product or service out there. My invitation is for the whole nation to get gun safety certified. And this is the beginning. I'm not asking you to become that right now. I'm asking you to sign that letter and be part of that movement that is already starting. There is no way that we're going to go back. So the question is, are you ready to save some lives? Probably, including your own life. Think about it. Get on board. We have a nonprofit called Change the Ref, but we're going to have a great discussion right now. And in that discussion, we're going to know how business leaders can help. And somehow, and this is where I have to introduce these amazing people. Yes. Why do you laugh when I say amazing people? Or is it when I said I was going to introduce them? I can't lie. So please, let's welcome to the panel so we can start this discussion. Andrew Ross Sorkin, columnist, DealBook founder and editor at large, The New York Times. You're the boss, whatever. You have the first choice. We also have here Matthew McCarthy, CEO from Ben & Jerry's. Joaquin loved Ben & Jerry's. We have Richard Edelman, President and CEO, Edelman. We have Tim Armstrong, founder and CEO, the DTX company. We have Wendy Clark, CEO, DDB Worldwide. And I guess that's my chair at the end. Thank you for being here, and let's see what we can do together.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much. It's a privilege for me to be here. This was not a topic I ever thought I would report on. I've spent my career covering the world of Wall Street and found myself writing about this issue, and in particular the role that businesses can play in this issue after the Parkland shootings. And it has been a personal journey for me. So thank you for having me here with all of you. I want to have a conversation right now about the role that business can play in this, and really also discuss not just what you can do, but also what the conversations need to be like inside your own companies about this. Because while Manny and I think many people in this room have a particular point of view, not everybody has that view. And so there are challenges associated with what the next steps look like, how to do some of this marketing, what works, what doesn't. I actually, you know what, Tim, I'm going to start with you for the following reason. Tim runs what might be described as a startup now, but in his prior life, worked at some very large American companies, including Google. He ran AOL. He bought Yahoo. All of that was at one point inside Verizon. These are big companies in America, oftentimes hard to move. Speak to the issue, if you could, of the conversation about guns and how you think you can have that conversation today in this what often feels like a very polarized world.
Sure. So one, I think Manny kind of hit it on the head, which was I think there's way more unity around the issue when you talk to people inside of companies around this. It's not a red state, blue state issue. I think people in general, 90 plus, I'd say the people I've worked with, 95, 99%, all agree that there has to be a lot of change here. I think where the drop off happens is corporations are generally good at doing a couple things. One is giving money to not-for-profits. And some companies are good at using their leverage of networks to basically push the agenda topic in general. And I think the fortitude of the leadership is probably the most important thing. And I just haven't been involved in gun safety probably since Sandy Hook mainly, but been to a lot of forums, given money, done stuff at the companies I've run. I'm just going to give you guys one example of something that I wish I knew more about when the gun safety thing came up, because I think it would have made a bigger difference, and I'll be super brief about this. But I don't know if people are aware of the Dickey Amendment, but in 1996, the NRA and the CDC basically cut a deal with each other where the CDC was able to do research on gun control, but the NRA negotiated the fact that the results could never be launched or put against gun control. And so from 1996 to really kind of 2018, and it still hasn't really changed yet, how many people here believe airbags and seatbelts and having rules around drinking and driving and things like that are important? Okay, so the same time the Dickey Amendment got signed, the CDC also started covering automobiles and doing research around automobiles. And does anyone know how much money is spent every year on research for safety of automobiles in the United States? $250 million. How much money has been spent per year on gun safety from the CDC? Zero. As a matter of fact, they had a $2.6 million budget, got removed to zero. So the issue for me running a large company and super interested in this topic, my kids played sports at Sandy Hook, I knew people in that community, is I would have, if I knew that the CDC wasn't doing anything preventative around gun research and data, and some private citizens have the RAND Corporation and people like that, but the country didn't do it, and the elected, we live in a representative democracy, the people we elected should be representing our views. They did not do anything to change the Dickey Amendment, and I still think it's probably one of the most damaging things in terms of gun prevention that's happened. So just my commitment to that slide, to Manny's slide, is I have a DTC platform. I'm going to target our DTC technology and company that we're launching this fall on the Dickey Amendment and the issues around it. So that's my commitment, Manny, on your side. And so I would just say, Andrew, the best thing for people like Manny who have not-for-profits, you have to tell corporations what to do. 20 executives sit in a room who want to help aren't going to be able to figure out, and the more you give them a specific roadmap, it will help. Sorry for the long diatribe, but that's...
Let me ask you this, though, Richard, which is to say Richard spends his career as the consigliere, if you will, to corporate America and to boardrooms everywhere. And it's an issue I know you're passionate about, but I also know it's an issue that you've raised with certain CEOs of major corporations who've said, look, this is not my issue. This is too divisive. This issue is too polarizing. I can't jump into this debate. I can maybe do it personally, but as a business, putting my brand on it, I can't do it. What do you say to that person?
So we did a study the last week of August on this exact topic, and we wanted to find out whether or not consumers and employees would feel differently about their companies if the CEO spoke up about gun safety. And what we found amazed us, which is 7 out of 10 Americans said, I am going to trust a company more if the CEO speaks up about guns. And 4 out of 5 said, I'm going to buy more products from that company if the CEO speaks up about guns. So both employees and consumers basically confirm our idea that, in fact, CEOs now need to speak up. Now, also, Andrew, you start to see that companies are being led by leaders who actually get the point that they're standing in for dysfunctional government. And again, 3/4 of people said CEOs should stand up and speak up and not wait for government on issues of the day. That's big. That's a change. That's why Doug McMillon, not only because he has those 2 issues in his store, but because he's trying to lead a decent company. And he's the head of the Business Roundtable. And the Business Roundtable, per your column, is now a stakeholder, not a shareholder-oriented operation. So I think all of this is speaking to the idea that business leaders now need to lead. Right. Now's the time.
Let me follow up just with one question. You know where I stand on this, but you also have seen what has happened, which is to say, not only do certain business leaders not want to speak up, those that have, and I think it's worth at least explaining what has happened. You know, after Bank of America and Citigroup, to their credit, tried to step away from the gun manufacturers, both advising them and providing financing to them, there were laws, literally in the state of Louisiana, put in place so that those banks would not be able to do bond offerings for the state. When Delta pulled the discount for the NRA, the state of Georgia literally pulled a tax credit that they would have had, real money, tens of millions of dollars to these companies. And so you have this issue where there's not just a consumer piece, but a political piece.
But there's a third piece, which is the employee piece. And if I'm an employee, I want to work for a company that has good values. And the values are expressed by a CEO speaking up on this issue. And now's the time.
Wendy, when you talk to corporations about the kinds of campaigns that they can produce and what they can associate with and what they can't associate with, how has it changed even in the past month on this issue?
Well, I think to build on Richard's point, you've got a stronger and stronger base of interest now in the general public, in the consumer mindset. They're more and more educated, they understand it more, and so I think you're seeing companies move forward together. The 150 signatures, I think, is just the beginning. To Tim's point, what CEOs can do is they network, right? They know other CEOs, and my suggestion would be the 150 on there should get 5 more CEOs each to come on board. And when you know, from someone who's worked at very big companies before, when you move in aggregate, there is a pressure and a leverage that is exerted into society that then you move an issue forward. And that movement goes when big companies move together.
And just to help Wendy on this point, statistics in this study, more Republicans, 2-to-1, are in favor of this. 2-to-1 gun owners are in favor of this. 7-to-1 Democrats are in favor of this. This is not a political issue.
And so
that's the key point.
When you saw Walmart move, you saw those many companies come right behind them because they were moving in aggregate.
And how much of this has to be a CEO to CEO decision, or I know we have a number of CMOs in this room.
Sure. I mean, the CMOs obviously are sitting at the table. They're in the C-suite. They can absolutely represent that their consumers are passionate about this, will be moved by this. We have evidence now from Edelman that will help us, you know, support that and support those actions.
Matthew, Ben & Jerry's, virtually from the beginning, has been a company based on purpose and has taken on lots of issues with social purpose. Speak to how you've done that, when you've decided to jump in on certain issues, when you've decided perhaps to hold back, and why. And I'd love to hear actually experiences where it worked and experiences maybe where it didn't.
Yeah. I'm the tremendous beneficiary of a long legacy. Our founders, Ben and Jerry, are still around, and the values that they put in place, and quite frankly, feeling that they didn't want to be the man. They really said, we don't want to do business as usual. So before we had any fancy terms for it, these guys were already in the business of, I think, hijacking parts of capitalism to say, I want business to do something, not just not do bad stuff. And that's guided us. We can address it up with some nice terms and names and whatnot. Our values center around not a whole lot of stuff around social justice, around climate justice, and there's some derivatives that fall under that. And to be honest with you, my job is to, I think there's a huge moment now where servant leadership can be reborn in new ways. A lot of old power models are dead and people just don't realize it yet. So I love the conversation around CEOs. CEOs are not the future. They can be a bit of a bridge to the future. I think what we found at Ben & Jerry's is our greatest source of authenticity isn't the stuff we do, it's the people that do them. Right? So we can hire agencies, we can create fancy, cry and buy type of creative and stuff like that. And I like that stuff. I mean, I'm a career marketer, but the reality is the people in your teams are your source of authenticity. And knowing that most of our people and all of our teams in the whole damn country want change, you have to wonder, where's the barrier? Is it the states, or actually is it the leadership of the companies, right? So most of the people that are answering these surveys ain't CMOs and CMOs, CEOs and C-suite folks. So we focus on a number of topics, mainly through partnerships with NGOs, to be honest with you. We're an ice cream company. We like to take our topics seriously, but we don't like to take ourselves too seriously. And we partner up with NGOs to help guide us on topics. Right now, front-end criminal justice reform is our key focus in the U.S. And I'll say a year ago, we launched our first ever pint of ice cream called Pecan Resist to call out specifically the actions of the Trump administration. And we had a lot of conversations about, oh shit, should we do this? Should we not do this? Is this gonna like what? And all these risk management plans and whatnot is. And I wouldn't say I'd do it again tomorrow. I'd do some things differently because we learned that the topic actually took a wild left turn when people started attacking off-topic issues around the Women's March and anti-Semitism. So the reason I bring that up is not to get into the details, but just simply say that you never know. I don't care how much risk management you do. Some shit's gonna go down that you can't possibly plan for. And if you're not ready for that, the pain of taking some action, then the plans are irrelevant.
Right. Hey Manny, here's a question for you. When you think about both the program that you talked about that you want to develop and the companies that have really come on board even in the past month, do you want companies in America to effectively lobby Washington to change the law? Is that the ultimate goal? Or maybe it's all of the above, do you believe that companies should be using their ecosystem supply chain and leverage along that supply chain to make change? I'll give you an example. It's not around guns, but Microsoft last year said, look, anybody who's doing business with us that doesn't have a 12-week policy for mothers, for example, that lets them off, we're actually just not going to do business with them. That's like a baseline. You could apply that kind of thing, frankly, to the gun industry, depending on what the parameters are. So I think one of the things I think that a lot of companies are trying to figure out is should we be spending our energy, time, and money on this issue in Washington? Is that what it is? Do we have more power without even dealing with the political apparatus and trying to solve some of this on our own?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't waste time with the political side of it. I don't do that. I think it's a social problem, and at the end of the day, these politicians will be voted out. I'm not going to be voted out. I hope none of you get voted out, but at least you don't have to go through an election to make that decision. So, but I do think that people will make their own decision, and they want to be on the good side. So as a result, we're going to have better politicians, because now we're going to change the culture in a permanent way. If we make a political change tomorrow, it could be reverted in 4 years by someone that just thinks different. He can wait 4 years, this bad person, and then bring everything back to how it was before. And I'm sick of playing that game. I think that we really can solve this problem in a permanent way as long as we change the culture. You mentioned the seatbelt example, it's great. I love to mention the tobacco industry example. So it's not about the lobby. Lobbies can lose power. It doesn't really matter, and I will never relay my future or the future of our kids. Actually, I'm going to take that back. The future of your kids on the lobbies. You have to make your own decisions, and corporate could be a key element in that change.
I want to open it up to questions, because I want this to be as interactive a conversation. I hope that there are questions and we can turn this into a conversation with you. But just to this point, though, about the politics versus business either doing it on their own, how do you guys think about the lobbying piece, meaning the Washington piece, and what can be done on your own? And also at the same time, I was talking to a company actually that was on that list that happens to give a decent amount of money every year to the RGA. This is the Republican Governors Association. And they said, look, I do that because that association tries to create a hospitable business environment where we're based. And I need to both have relations with these people, and I have lots of back and forth, and they're going to play a huge part of my world. And yet at the same time, the RGA is supporting oftentimes lots of Republican politicians who you very well know, who go on TV, who say that they will never sign a bill like this. And so there becomes this issue. And by the way, there's also a risk to the company on the other end that they get called hypocrites.
So Andrew,
what do you think about that?
Chicago is a very interesting case history because 2 years ago, about a dozen CEOs got together and put together $50 million, Get In Chicago, and it was basically to give money to local NGOs, try to keep kids after school to have sports or, after school education, and it hasn't worked very well. It hasn't worked well because the NGOs couldn't scale, but it's a city that needs solution, and it needs the companies to re-up and try again. It can't be like, it didn't work, we're out. It has to be, it didn't work, now what are we going to do different? And maybe it's bigger NGOs have to come in, Manny, maybe you come. I mean, we need better because 53 people getting shot on one weekend, a week ago, it's crazy.
I don't think we can be scared of failure. So you heard Matthew talk really openly about something that didn't quite go the way that he thought it was, but he's not pulling back, he's doubling down on doing that. Failure is just a bruise, not a tattoo. Right? So you have to get back up and you have to move forward and you have to try again. Not everything every brand does is going to be brilliant and perfect around this, but I think it is the collective. It's the collective actions that the brands start to take that create the leverage and the movement taken together. And you even think about the seal that Manny had in his presentation. Just even the normalization of us starting to look for, see that seal. I was thinking about it just on the doors of my agency. We're B2B, we're not B2C, but our associates coming through and pushing on a door that has that seal every day, and the impression, which is what advertising does, that makes for them, and that they go into the world and seek and look for that certification. We've got to use our power, the brand's power, to normalize what the expectation is.
And that's a huge change, by the way. And I know that some corporations made decisions, like not so long ago, gay marriage was an issue, and today, supporting gay marriage is cool. It became part of the way that we show our business. So Joaquin was not shut down because he was Black, Latino, gay, straight, tall, or short. This is the common issue. This could happen to anyone in this room. So that's why it's so important that we treat it as the common issue. And that's why there's a 97% of approval from society. That's the reason why. So we're just there. If you listen to all the speeches here, I went to 2 of them yesterday, Generation Z thinks this way. There's a lot of kids. They love what they're doing. They only think about the future. And then you listen to some CEOs talking about how important it is to think in a progressive way and be good and show that we care about social issues. Now you listen to this, we should sit on the same table, right? It's so obvious what it needs to be done.
I want to continue to encourage everybody here to send in questions. We have 2 on the screen here, by the way. It's slido.com. Hashtag AW New York, which you all know. The first one actually came to me. I like to ask the questions, but it says, Andrew, you've consistently reported on gun safety. How can media coverage do more to highlight this issue? What would you say to your peers? The only thing I would say is one of the things that I've found doing this, oddly enough, is both it being rewarding, but also I understand why it's scary. Because the other side of reporting on this, and I'm not talking about advocacy journalism, but just writing about it, even in the most straight down the middle way, the amount of trolling, I've had people come up to me at airports that have intimidated me physically. It is not the easiest thing to do, but I would encourage journalists, more than anything actually, to spend time not just, frankly, talking to this side, but actually talking to the other side. I've gone to gun shows. I think there's a gun culture in this country that's worth knowing about and feeling in a way that, frankly, most of us on the coasts don't appreciate or understand. And I think that there's a way to do all of this that actually does go down the middle, which actually appreciates and recognizes what that culture is and allows for it, and yet also keeps our kids and all of us safe. I think that's the important piece. That's what I would encourage my peers.
So one thing I would just say, I think, Andrew, though, that the media likes to make this a black or white issue. Right. I used to own the Huffington Post, all that. So we got into this topic all the time. But the reality is the 97% of what everyone agrees to, and I think there is a gun culture in the US, is safety guards for children on guns, background checks. The things that I would say are the seatbelts, airbags of the gun industry. That's what people agree to. And the reality is, when things get covered in the media, the two things you never hear about is, would this have been presented if the person had a seatbelt on, or had to go through get a license check, or those things? I don't know. Maybe the second thing you never hear about when it gets covered in the media is, did the people in that area vote for or against gun control measures? So I think the media tries to make it either for guns or anti-guns. The reality is, most of the country is, I don't want to say they're pro-gun, but it is a gun culture, but people are pro-regulation, and we're being held hostage by a fringe few percentages in probably both sides, to what 97% of the people in the U.S. want. And I think that's, as citizens of the country, you have to realize, like, we're getting held hostage, and the media is probably helping that by making it political black-white. And Tim, the question is, how do we address that?
I would only add, at Edelman, we have 60 people working on this pro bono for the Gun Safety Alliance. The two most effective are Republicans who worked for McCain. And they are absolutely of the Republican Party. They are gun owners, and they are very happy to talk about background checks and safe storage. That's it, and that's what works. But their pedigree really matters.
Okay, they're going to take us off the stage in just 2 minutes, so let's do sort of rapid fire here. Question, if I'm sitting in the audience and my company hasn't signed the letter or taken a stand on this, what advice do you have for me?
Sign. Right now. We're going to make sure you sign today before you leave. Thank you.
What do you say? Anybody want to take that?
Well, and I think to the 3 points that were in the presentation, in Manny's presentation, signing's just the beginning, right? So sign, great, but then take actions. Put actions behind that. Actually, I quote Manny all the time on, words are great, but nothing happens without action, right? No change will happen without action, I think is your exact quote. And that's what you really have to do. The signing is just, I think, more obligatory. It's the actions that follow the signing and how you're going to represent that to your organization, how you're going to bring your associates with you, how you're going to propagate that into society is the most critical thing.
Okay, we have another question here, and I may turn it around a little bit. This says CDC car safety, $250 million, gun safety zero, mental health, ? This becomes a big issue and talking point oftentimes in this dialogue, and I think it's more than a talking point. It's an important issue. Yes, business leaders shouldn't wait for a dysfunctional government to act. Aren't sane business leaders missing mentally ill employees and the issue of mental health in America? I will expound upon that question. Who wants to take that?
The short answer is yes, period. Right? And so I think I'm not an expert on this topic, but I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to see that we're missing lots of people, and we're investing a lot more money in things that don't necessarily help the people that need mental health support. So if you think about the over-policing of schools and the school-to-prison pipeline, if you look at the amount of investment we've put into policing schools versus actually providing counselors in schools that have mental health backgrounds, it's shocking numbers. And so I think this is true of companies as well. I think this is an area where what we've tried to do at Ben & Jerry's, but also at Unilever, is create a new slew of outreach and really to destigmatize and actually to decentralize people's access to any method of individual support. I don't want to call it mental health support, but the idea of people going through different things in their lives is perhaps a way to catch it. I think so. I think that companies can do a lot more in this space, particularly at a time when companies are deciding, should I even offer health care?
Right.
I do want to make sure that we understand that mental health is not the reason why we have this gun epidemic. No. Okay? Because I know crazy people all around the world, and they don't deal with this. So I always, every time mental health comes as part of a conversation, I want to be very clear. This is not the problem, and it's also not video games. We have too many guns, and now we have to fix that.
But let me ask you, Manny, and anyone else can respond to this, and then I want to get to the question that's been asked up here for Wendy, which is, and maybe it's simply political, from a messaging perspective even, would you get farther by combining the physical gun issue itself and gun safety itself with the issue of mental health, given the way it's being portrayed? Maybe you can blame the media for this, but the way that at least the political class and others who may not be on your side view this?
Well, I try to speak the reality. I don't build my messages in that way that I should touch these and these and these, and then I will convince people. I have a dead son. If that is not convincing you, then you have a problem. So my own opinion, and I gotta be loyal to my thoughts, is that mental illness is not the problem. I don't want to think that way. Actually, I think that's a great argument from the other side. For the gun industry, it's great thinking and blaming on crazy people that is actually doing the wrong thing with something that is inanimated like a gun. I don't buy that. I really don't buy that. So I want to make it very simple and easy to understand. And I have very few skills when it comes to speaking in English, but I found a way to make it simple to understand. This is about guns, and we need to talk about guns, period.
Okay, thank you, Manny.
To answer your question
Yeah.
directly, I would ask Richard, I mean, the first thing you would do is go and research that. You'd understand if you put those two messages together, is it more compelling to get to the answer we want? So I don't know that we can guess whether it would or wouldn't be, but it's something infinitely researchable. To come on to the storytelling piece, I mean, thank you, Bob, for the layup question, wherever you are. Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, no one needs to read much further than, Daniel Kahneman, who talked about system 1 and system 2 thinking. We as humans operate on emotion. We watching that Sandy Hook film, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to sit up here. I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a mess, right? Just the emotion moves you, it makes you feel something, it makes you take action. And so we fundamentally believe that the use of emotion through storytelling is way more powerful than rational thinking. We are not rational beings, and we try to go at one another with rational, it is irrational that I wore these shoes and knew I was going to walk to advertisement, but emotionally I like them. You understand, right? That's what we do. So we try and have a linear and rational discussion on gun control. It's not going to move people nearly as much as when Manuel stands up here and says, and corrects himself just a minute ago, saying, not our children, your children. Right. That is what moves us to take action. We have to use that emotion.
Also, those children at Sandy Hook, and nobody did check. So does that really move us?
Well, I think we've got to stay at it, right? We've got to use communications. We've got to get the brands involved, as everyone is suggesting.
It doesn't move them.
Well, I think we're trying to move the 97% who agree with universal background checks, right? We have aggregate belief in this. We have to move them to take action.
Okay, we have to leave the conversation there. I want to thank all of you. I want to especially thank Manny for all the work you're doing. This is arguably the most critical issue of our time. I know there are a lot of critical issues in the world, but this is one at least at the top of my list. So thank you all.